Hi, good evening. This is Talk Back. I'm Sheila, and tonight I have the great pleasure to interview someone who's running for office in a special election on January 14th. Correct. It's Brian Smith, and he's running to fill the seat of the State House of Representatives, District 48, that was held by Linda Orange, who sadly died tragically a few weeks ago. Good evening, Brian.
Hello, Sheila. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I'm sure you might have had aspirations to run for office given your background, but I'm sure you didn't expect it to happen this way.
Not at all. Particularly this seat, it's something I thought about when I was much younger. However, once Linda was elected, she was just a wonderful representative, and it certainly never ever again entered my mind.
Right.
When I thought about it earlier, I was at a place in my life. My children were young. My career was sort of still on the early stages, and it just wasn't the right time, which is why it never happened.
Right. And now you're really in a whirlwind kind of situation. For whatever reason, the rules are that election has to be Tuesday, January 14th. You have an opponent who's running on the Republican side. Is that right? Is it the same person, I think, who ran against Linda in the last election?
That is correct.
Yeah. And you've got to really put together a campaign and some policies and everything. So this has been a very, very whirlwind experience for you and your family, I suppose.
That's a good word for it, actually. Yeah. It's been very exciting, and it certainly has turned our world upside down.
And when you thought about it, you must have been gratified to get the support of the town committee and your friends in Colchester.
Yes, very much. So the first thing I did when we thought about it was my wife and I spoke about it one evening, and then the next day we felt, yes, we should, for a number of reasons. Not only my earlier interests, I have experience locally on the Board of Selectmen in Colchester and the Board of Finance. I chaired the first Charter Adoption Commission and a subsequent Charter Revision Commission in Economic Development. So I'd had some experience in politics at a local level. I always did have the interest, so my wife would say in some respects it was sort of a bucket list item, although it's not something that I would have ever wanted to choose to do under the circumstances. However, when you're faced with the tragedy as we suffered in the 48th District, and the statute calls for a very, very tight time frame, you sort of have to take your emotional involvement of some questions and to a degree that you're able to set them aside. And
exactly. It's almost hard to raise your hand and say, yeah, I want to do it, I want to do it, but we have to do, we have to move on.
So yeah, it was a feeling that on one side sort of was uncomfortable to make, and on the other side was very exciting.
But we can't leave the people of the 48th District without a representative.
Absolutely, and that's something that Linda certainly would not want us to do.
Exactly, and you had a good relationship with her, I'm sure.
Yes. I knew Linda throughout her tenure in the State House, and got to know her, as you were probably aware, through the Democratic Town Committee in Colchester, and always admired her for her energy and the excitement that she had about the things that she did, and her ability to make friends, to cross the aisle, to speak and listen with everyone, to take in all points of view, and always, throughout it all, keep the interests of the people in the district at heart.
And know how to put through legislation and get it passed by getting colleagues on, as you said, on both sides of the aisle and coalitions of people to help her out.
Absolutely.
And to do it with a kind of sense of humor and a certain cunning or nice way about it.
Yeah, well, Linda was always a very likable person, and if you're going to do business with anybody, the first thing you have to do is you need to like them. She was a great maker of friends.
Okay, and so it's going to be hard to fill her shoes, but you're going to try, and we're going to talk about your background and why you have the experience and the history to do this.
Great.
All right, so tell us something about yourself. Where did you grow up?
I was born in New Jersey. I moved to Connecticut when I was 3 years old, and I grew up in Enfield, Connecticut, east of the river. I've told people I've spent most of my life on the east side of the Connecticut River, which is why I love the district and the towns that are in our area.
Enfield is on the east side.
It is. It is. It's Hartford County, but it's on the east side of the river.
I think of it almost into Springfield. Well, it is way up there.
Yes, that's true. And growing up, I probably spent more time in Springfield than Hartford. So I'm a sort of eastern Connecticut guy. I was all over the the Quiet Corner in particular. You know, that's where we hiked. That's where we went fishing. So I'm pretty familiar with the towns way up there. And
What's your part? Well,
they're not in our district so much.
Let's just set the stage right now. What are the towns in your district so everybody understands that?
We have Colchester, and then our district includes parts of Lebanon, Windham, and Mansfield.
Okay, and Windham is really the name of the town, which is Willimantic.
Yeah, the center.
Center.
People know Willimantic as
Right.
sort of the central core of Windham.
Right.
But as in high school, I ran track at Windham High School, for example.
Okay.
So, you know, I'm familiar with the town.
You didn't go to Windham High School. You
No,
just visited.
no.
You ran track there.
Ran track
Yeah.
against them and
Okay.
lost.
All right. And so when did you move toward the Colchester area? How did that happen?
So my wife and I settled in Colchester in 1982. At the time, she was working in the State Department of Revenue Services in the field office in Norwich. And I had moved back from New York City, and I was working in Hartford.
What were you doing in New York City? How did you get there?
Well, I graduated from Central Connecticut State University in 1979 with a degree in theater arts. And so I moved to New York to be an actor. And for the most part, I waited tables because I couldn't afford to take what jobs that came my way. But right before I left, the summer before, I had met my wife, and we had sort of a summer relationship that we thought would probably end at the end of the summer when I moved away, but it didn't. We continued to correspond and see each other, and more frequently I was returning to Connecticut, and we got engaged, and so I settled back into Connecticut, where, you know, my heart is anyway.
Okay, so you are a thespian.
That is correct.
Okay.
I was earlier in particular.
In comedy, in drama, or both, or?
Well, my background started in musicals. You know, I started doing plays in the 7th grade. We had a great theater program in Enfield High School and also in the junior high schools.
What did you star in or perform in? What shows?
So I was in Calamity Jane was the first show I ever did. I
okay.
was in Guys and Dolls, where I played Benny South
My
Street.
favorite show.
I was in Oklahoma.
Wow.
I was in The Mouse That Roared. I played Henry David Thoreau in The Night Thoreau Spent in Jail. In high school, that's probably it. I did a Chekhov play in junior high school as well. In college, I played some musical roles. I was in The Fantastics. I played the boy, Matt.
Wow.
And I played Tony in West Side Story one summer as well.
Wow, so you probably have a good voice, too.
Not anymore.
But, you know, there are so many talented people in the musical comedy all around the country who are never going to, quote, make it, but they're working in drama schools and music schools, teaching, directing, community theaters, and some of them deserve awards and are better than some of the people that we see on the screen who, for whatever luck or position or they just make it, and somebody does it.
My last roommate that I had in college spent his entire career on Broadway. He was in the original company of Phantom of the Opera. He left. He did national tours with Cats, Les Mis, where sometimes he played the lead role there. He was also in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and for 2 weeks he played the lead role there because he was an understudy.
Okay.
And then he went back and finished his career back in Phantom of the Opera. So he had a great career.
Great. So we know your background. So we know you're capable of putting on a performance, which sometimes when you're giving a speech in the legislature or trying to get your public to listen to your leadership about an issue, you need to be a performer. There's nothing, that's okay.
It doesn't hurt. I mean, so I'm a little bit more comfortable in front of an audience than some other people might be. But I don't think, I don't see that as a tremendous, skill, or it's just something that happens over time. And so I just was exposed to it perhaps earlier than some other people.
And so then where did you go when you stopped waiting tables and came back from New York?
So we had an actor doing a play. I was running a theater company that I had formed, a nonprofit in Hartford, for about 5 years. And we had an actor who was a UConn graduate who came back from a summer in Greece where he had been arrested at the Acropolis for sort of a prank, like a high school, college kind of a prank. I won't go into the details. But he had a legal bill that he had to pay when he came back. And so he was desperately trying to find a paying job. And he had been offered a position in the mailroom at a law firm called Dayberry and Howard, at the time the largest law firm in Connecticut. But he also then got an offer at a restaurant called 36 Lewis Street, and he figured he could make more money waiting tables than working for $5 an hour in a mailroom. So he took that job, and I was a little bit older than him and looking to get out of the waiting table.
So you took the other job?
So I put my hand up and said, hey, I'll do that job. And a friend of a friend got me an interview, and I went to Daybury and Howard in the mailroom, and 6 months later they had an opening for a corporate paralegal. And luckily for me, I had done the paperwork to form a nonprofit theater company and had known enough as a messenger to know that was one of the jobs, was to do that kind of work. So I presented that paperwork and said, I don't know everything that they do, but I know they do this. So 5 of the partners interviewed me, and they took a chance on me. And they were wonderful because they taught me securities law and about financial transactions and the Uniform Commercial Code and just general corporate business law in Connecticut. I became a regular for 13 years in the Secretary of the State's office, there twice a day most days, filing papers, you know.
Right. So isn't it, it's kind of fun, but it's part happenstance, part luck, part destiny, that you met up with your active friend and switched jobs and so forth.
There's a lot to be said for sometimes success is just the act of being there. Because being there at the right time. I had originally gone away to school at George Washington University in the pre-law program, and I left it.
Oh, okay.
So it was, for me, a little interesting to have come back.
So now let's get down to the business of government. How did you get interest in, well, you were working in a law firm and learning all of those subjects, which are kind of important and helpful to you now. How did you make the leap to working in government, in the public service?
So I always had an interest, and I would thank the teachers in Enfield High School, particularly in the history program and the English teachers for that. So I was always interested in politics, and these were the Watergate years, so there was a lot of political discussion that took place in the schools. I worked on Toby Moffat's campaign when I was his first campaign.
I've interviewed him once, yes.
When I was a junior in high school, so that was sort of my baptism into the political world.
For people who are watching, he was one of our congressmen.
When the 6th district existed in Connecticut, now there are only 5. I met Walter Mondale at that time, so I've always had that interest. After I settled in Colchester, I started applying for board openings that I thought might be good fits for me. And our late select person, Jenny Contois, took a chance on me and asked me to get involved with helping people understand how municipal charters work. So I started doing charter circles, just study groups, in 1992. And in 1993, they formed a charter adoption commission, as you know, and I was the chair of that. And myself and a good friend of mine, Ron Goldstein, were the chair and vice chair, and we sort of did the heavy lifting on the drafting of that. But we had a commission that was fully bipartisan, that had all points of view. I think there were 9 of us, and one of the things we did early on was agree. We all wanted to come up with a draft charter to propose to the town that we could all unanimously stand behind and vote for. And because we made that commitment right up front, we want to work together. There was a lot of give and take. There was a lot of compromise and some frank discussions and honest discussions. And in the end, nobody got everything they wanted, but everybody was happy with the final product. And for me, that was just a wonderful experience about how government is supposed to work. And it really is what really got me excited about serving. After that, I had the opportunity to serve on our Economic Development Commission, as I said, and we were the commission that drafted up the original Colchester Tax Incentive Program to help try and encourage businesses to come into our town. I also later worked on charter revision and also then was asked to fill a vacancy on the Board of Selectmen and then run for a seat, which I did. And so I served about a term and a half on the Board of Selectmen. I then was asked by our historical society to help them manage the Zagre farm property when that was bequeathed to them, and work with the Quittawbog Valley engineers and the Colchester Fish and Game to try and make that work. And then subsequently, I got on the Board of Finance and ran and served a term on the Board of Finance.
So you are going to be ready on day one to take your seat in the legislature and figure out the ropes. And you'll have to learn the parliamentary procedures there. But I'm sure you'll have lots of support from the colleagues who were Linda's colleagues in the
Yeah,
in the house?
I think I have a very good background and gained over the years with my time in Colchester an understanding of some of the issues that smaller towns east of the river face.
Okay, so let's go into it. What have you developed your platform, your policies, the issues that you're going to work on when you get there?
Yeah, I have. So first, my affinity for Linda is because there were many things that she was promoted and worked hard for that are very near and dear to me. We've talked a little bit about education, and I had great teachers when I grew up in the public schools. My children went through the public schools in Colchester, and they also had great teachers. And there's always one or two teachers that sort of help shape your life.
Right.
And so I feel very strongly, as Linda did, that we need to do everything we can at the state level to ease the burden on the towns to help them develop the educational programs that they need for their children. And so that is one thing that I want to focus on, as she did, really helping to make our schools stronger. And
how do you do that as a state legislator? Of course, in Colchester, you've got, and each town has their own board of education that makes policy and writes the budget. But as a state legislator, how do you work on that?
Well, as we know, that a great part of the educational funding in Connecticut comes through the state through the educational cost sharing program. And every year there's pressure at the state to
and
manage budgets.
Every year people like Linda would be advocating for her towns to get the most that
and
they
that
could.
is something that I absolutely want to continue doing. And I don't doubt that legislators across the state do that. It's very, very important.
Right.
And that's one voice we have to have. I think that the programs for each school and what they need is different. And I want to be able to learn what other opportunities within the state government system there may be to help our school systems achieve their goals outside of just straight up educational cost sharing.
So that's an important one. How about the issue of economic development? I know that's important to you. How would you work on that in the legislature?
And it is important to me. My wife and I, in particular in Colchester, spent our whole lives in the town center of Colchester.
And tell us what you've done.
So we've owned, and we do own, and have restored 3 historic houses. They're 1850, our first house was built. The house we're in now is in 1840.
Give us what the house is where. Look.
So the house we're in now, 1840, is known as the Horace Smith or the O'Connell House. It's right on the town green in front of the Memorial Green of Colchester. And we own the house right next to it, which was the Reverend Willard House, and also Dr. Cragen's home after he married the Reverend Willard's daughter, Dr. Cragen of the Cragen Memorial Library.
The library.
So those are 2 houses right on the green that we own that we've restored. One has 5 apartments in it, and our house, the white one that people would recognize if they drove by, is the one that we're converting to a bed and breakfast. We have started taking the guests in through Airbnb.
People have to realize the legislature is not a full-time, right? They have 2 sessions, a shorter one and a longer one.
Right.
Okay. And there is a remuneration, there is pay, but it's not a lot.
Right. I'm not running because I need to earn a living from this. Although part of the reason why earlier in my life I chose not to run or to put my hat in the ring was because I did need to earn a full-time salary to raise my children. So I'm in a position now where I can do that. Our 3rd house is a Greek Revival down on South Main Street, about 9 or 10 houses away from the green. And that house, some people may know, it was Abe Cohen's house at one time, and he had the dress factory in town that partnered with Schuster's Express, and as I understand it, it was very symbiotic. Schuster's brought up the material from New York. The factory cut and made the dresses. Schuster drove the dresses down to the garment district in New York and came back.
What are you doing with that house?
That house presently is rented out to a family just like ours, a boy and a girl, and they're 2 parents.
So you have a stake in wanting Colchester to grow, develop, and be a destination place for people to come to.
So our, my philosophy for Colchester is that people talk about the charm of our town, and Lebanon people, I think, talk about how proud they are of their town, their green, and the historic buildings that they have around their green. So every town is different. Every town has desires for their economic development to happen in a different way that's unique to them. And having lived in towns east of the river, I've seen a lot of those towns, and I understand that they're all a little bit different.
So what would you like to do to enhance the economic development?
I first want to listen to the elected officials in those towns as well as the citizens, and really understand how they want to see their towns grow. And then as I learn my way through the legislature, seek the opportunities that will align with the goals of specific towns and try and help them gain the support, whether it's financial or whether it's just, emotional and support in other means, from state government to help them achieve those goals, whether it's helping them work with federal authorities to bring development money into their towns or whatever it takes to just move their programs along. And for my own, Colchester focus is to try and adaptively reuse as many of the historic homes as we can.
But you're going to be the state representative for the entire district.
Absolutely.
Even though you happen to live in Colchester,
That's
you're
right.
going to give equal weight and equal
Right.
education to all the towns.
Well,
of course,
if you look at a town like
course.
Wyndham, the goals and the needs for the Willimantic portion of Wyndham are vastly different than Mansfield or Lebanon or Colchester.
And you feel like you really kind of know that. You've been a resident here. You've figured that out.
We've spent a lot of time up there.
Spent a lot of time. Okay, great. So let's talk about another issue. I know it's important to you lowering the cost of health care, and that's something that I know was important to Linda as well.
Right.
How are you going to work on that?
I would like to see us do what we could to rein in prescription drug costs. I am a strong believer in trying to promote and expand health care options for all citizens. At this point, I don't know enough about the details to say that I would be in favor of Medicare for all. I think there's a huge price tag there that has to be weighed, but I am in favor of doing whatever we can to achieve the goal of making sure that every person in this country and in our state and in our district who wants health care has an opportunity to obtain that they can afford and that will serve their needs. My family, my late sister had medical problems since she was 10 weeks old. And for a long period, my family didn't have health care, and I know for a fact what those kind of crushing costs can do. In many respects, our family broke because of that.
Well, I think studies have shown that health care costs is a major driving factor in most bankruptcies.
Right, and it wasn't ours.
If you don't have health, and then the other big factor is, I don't know how many, at one point I heard of 40,000 Americans die every year because they don't have health insurance of any kind, so it's a big issue.
And the system we have now, which in many ways encourages people for preventive care or for minor issues to have to go to the emergency room, just drives up costs in another way, because it all eventually passes through. And therefore, the people who do have insurance still pay more.
I don't think people realize
the
wonderful elements of with Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act that had so many great preventive measures in there and early tests for detection and diagnosis.
That's right.
And you're right. People who think, well, I can just go to the emergency room and they have to take care of me, that puts an enormous burden on everyone.
It's simply just not the most efficient way to do it.
It's not just not efficient, but it doesn't catch the health issues when they need to be caught and can be prevented.
But another important element of healthcare is making sure that we protect the present situation where existing conditions are covered.
Right.
If that wasn't in place, a person like my late sister, for example, would never have been able to.
Didn't the state of Connecticut pretty much codify the Obamacare?
Right.
So that's important for our state if anything happens to that.
That's right.
Act, which is still imperiled at potential.
Well, we have to worry about if funding dries up at the federal level, they start cutting costs. That's going to put us in a little bit of a pickle. So it's very important that we do everything we can to be diligent.
Now, something else that was important to Linda that I know you want to continue is making sure expanding emergency services, prioritizing public safety. Talk about that.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a family that has numerous police and firemen in it, these are, in my family, cousins grew up like siblings, so I'm very close to all of my cousins. My father, when I was very young, was a police officer. He was a rookie with my Uncle Jimmy, and my Uncle Jimmy stayed on that force and retired as chief of police. My other cousin's son is a lieutenant on that force now. My cousin Dave is the retired fire captain there, and his brother Mike is a fire captain still working in our hometown, which was Weehawken, New Jersey. as I said, I moved away when I was 3, but
Yeah.
we spent a lot of time there. So, through conversations with my cousins and also my father telling me what it was like even as a police officer in the 50s, I kind of understand the dangerous situations that they were all put in. And I've seen, we all hear tragic stories. My cousin just yesterday posted on Facebook because a police officer was shot in Jersey City, New Jersey within the last couple of days.
Right.
And that's just tragic. Firemen are injured all the time when they're responding to even minor house fires. They're in danger. I really do believe that wherever possible, whether it's through grant money, and that could be public grant money, but it could also be from nonprofits that support these causes, that we need to try and do everything we can to help our first responders make sure they have the manpower and the equipment and the training to be able to do their jobs as safely as possible, recognizing that they're never going to be completely safe because they take huge risks to try and keep us safe. I was in the firehouse for a brief conversation yesterday in Colchester, and we talked about that. And the need there is that they don't have manpower in our firehouse 24 hours,
Right.
which is a goal that they would like to accomplish. And that's probably true in many communities that have volunteer or largely volunteer forces.
Right. And just one other issue before we start to conclude. Of course, you're interested in making sure that each town has the proper services and expanded services for the seniors in that population.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty much getting there myself, as you know. But my late mom was a person who, she was very independent. But towards the end, she was slowing down and she needed some help, and we were lucky that we were able to afford the kind of help that that she was able to afford.
Right. So
the help
maybe
she
the
needed.
different towns in the district can
Right.
apply for certain grants and funding through the state programs and.
Everybody's everybody needs a little help somewhere along the way in their life, whether it's earlier in their life or later in their life. We have a moral obligation to take care of everyone in a holistic way. When we start talking about our seniors, they're in some respects more vulnerable than any other demographic in our society, and so there are different issues involved. Not only seeing that they have the proper health care and that they can get to the doctor's office on time.
And they make up a big part of each town.
Yes,
percentage.
but that we can make sure that if they have family that's moved away, that there are people who, whether it's neighbors or whether it's if there's no one else available, whether there's a staff person from the town. Sometimes it might be the police officer that patrols their area, that checks in to make sure they're okay. And the towns, I think, have genuine interests. Every town has some sort of a program to help service seniors' needs, and every town wishes that they could do more based on the needs of their citizens.
Exactly.
And it really is the role of government to try and help that.
Okay, great.
Happen.
So in the remaining moments we have, do you have a contact email address or website or something you can tell us?
Yes.
Brian Smith, where do we find that?
So on the website, our campaign is briansmith2020.com.
Okay.
On Facebook, it's Brian Smith for State Representative.
Okay.
And Brian at briansmith2020.com is the email address.
Okay.
But any of those will get to me.
We'll get to you.
Yes.
People can check you out. And I'm going to give you a minute, the final minute, to look into your camera here and tell the people of the 48th District why they should vote for you on Tuesday, January 14th.
Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you for your time, Sheila. So as you know, I've been a 37-year resident of this district, and I've become familiar with many of the issues, the differences between our 4 towns, which are significant, and I also have paid attention to the programs that Linda Orange promoted for us all in the legislature. I feel strongly that her legacy is one that should continue. I've always admired her ability to listen to each individual that she encountered, whether they're in the State House on the other side of the aisle, colleagues on her side of the aisle, residents in Lebanon, Mansfield, Willimantic, or Colchester of all political persuasions and points of view. And I have a deep desire to pick up that baton and carry that same mission forward. I believe that I'm a good listener, and I can promise you that I will take what I hear to heart and be your voice in Hartford going forward. So please come out on January 14th and cast your vote for me. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Brian, and thank you for listening. This is Talk Back. Don't forget, if you're in the 48th District, you're going to vote on Tuesday, January 14th. See you next time. Good night.
Thank you very much.